Moon Knight has been my favorite character to main in Marvel Rivals, and with Season 2 balance changes and updates, I think that everybody should be trying him out too. Moon Knight is a duelist that is best at attacking groups of enemies that are clumped together. His primary and secondary attacks bounce off of nearby enemies and onks and can deal a high amount of damage in a short time if used properly. Moon Knight has many abilities that help him with damage and movement, all with their own unique uses. Crescent Dart is his primary fire and is a triple shot with projectile speed that fires in a straight trajectory and has 30 shots. The base damage is 25, but with the 3 darts that are shot at once, as well as the maximum 3 bounces between enemies, the damage on these can really add up. Moonblade is his secondary fire and is very similar to his primary fire, except it does more damage and only 1 shot. It does 80 damage and can also bounce off of enemies and onks up to 3 times. Ancient Ankh is his E ability and is arguably his most important tool. Moon Knight throws an Ankh at enemies that has a radius of 7 meters and pairs it up with his primary and secondary fire to bounce his projectiles around nearby enemies. It has a lengthy cooldown and should be used wisely, and when shot in a group of enemies and paired with his other attacks, Moon Knight can get a lot of damage and quick limbs. Moonlight Hook is his F ability and the first of his many movement options. It shoots a grappling hook that pulls Moon Knight towards its location. Rising Leap is a double jump that he can perform with a fast cooldown and a high reach. Night Glider is his shift ability and the last of his movements. While in the air, Moon Knight can glide slightly faster than his base movement speed and can be paired with his other movements to help gain high ground. Triple Eclipse is his melee attack that launches enemies upwards after the 3rd hit. Hand of Khonshu is his ultimate ability that spawns a circular portal above enemies and rains down high damaging talons within the circle. Full Moon is his team up ability with Cloak and Dagger that turns Moon Knight invisible and gives him great heals within a radius for a short time. This ability is one of his best and can be used in many different situations. With Season 2 coming out, Moon Knight got many buffs to his abilities and didn't really see any nerfs. Here are the updates. Increase Crescent Dart projectile speed from 120 meters per second to 150 meters per second. This change will be very prominent while playing Moon Knight, as his primary attack is one that he usually spams at enemies. Making the speed of his shots quicker will give for an easier aiming experience and can help for dealing damage as soon as enemies are open. Moonblade new effect. Gain 25 bonus health with each enemy hit up to a max of 100. 3 seconds after the bonus health stops increasing, it will start to fall off at a rate of 20 per second. Moon Knight can always use a little bit of healing, and this particular change will come in very useful for escaping and holding ground. Before this update, the only way Moon Knight could self-heal was through Cloak and Dagger's team-up ability where he goes invisible. Now, Moon Knight will have a chance to self-heal without needing the team-up ability. The time might not seem too long, but it is good to get a bunch of damage with the Moonblade and gives a great opportunity to get out of combat without dying. Speed up Moonlight Hook's startup time after hit from 0.4 seconds to 0.15 seconds. The speed of the grappling hook used to be really slow and clunky and wasn't fast enough to escape most situations where you're being pushed, but making the hook faster helps Moon Knight get out of combat much quicker and makes his overall movement a lot better. Extend the duration of Hand of Khonshu from 3.5 seconds to 4.5 seconds, and increase the number of talons generated during this period from 14 to 18. Additionally, the fall-off speed of the talons has been slightly enhanced. A new damage fall-off mechanic for the spell field has been added, beginning at 1.5 meters from the center and reaching a maximum reduction of 70% at 5 meters. They have been messing around with Moon Knight's ult quite a bit, and this change makes it so enemies closer to the center of the ult take more damage than enemies on the outer radius. With this, however, the duration of the ult has increased, and the number of talons has increased. This change isn't necessarily a straight buff or a nerf, but it will act differently in different scenarios, and will still feel relatively the same. Here are a few of the tricks I have learned while playing Moon Knight. Since his primary fire shoots 3 darts at a time, they can spread if you are moving around, but when you stand still, they all hit the target. It may be useful to stand still while you are using your primary fire to be the most accurate. Another important tip for accuracy and aim is this custom crosshair from Moon Knight. I got the design from Marvel Rivals Merchant, who has a whole video on crosshairs for all the characters that I will link below. The reason this crosshair is so useful for Moon Knight is the outer ring, which is used for targeting moving enemies or enemies at a distance. If you track enemies using the outer circle, you'll be able to hit many more of your shots with the travel time of the darts. The key to this character is to spam your enemies when they are in groups of 2 or more. You will still be able to get kills while picking them off one by one, however that is not the ideal situation. If you are caught in a situation where you are facing another character one-on-one, the best options are to use your mobility to escape or distance yourself, and then throw an Ankh at your feet and use your primary and secondary on that, which can wipe out other duelists pretty fast. High ground is one of the most valuable assets to Moon Knight. With his double jump, grappling hook, and glider, it should be easy to get high ground on most maps. Using high ground, Moon Knight is able to use his Ankh and his attacks at groups of enemies while they are focused on everyone else, and it is much easier to get sneaky shots from behind the enemy lines, which can lead to some easy kills. There aren't a ton of combos with Moon Knight, but here are the ones you need to know. When attacking an enemy or group of enemies, you should be throwing your Ankh in between them, pulling them inwards and dealing a bit of damage, and then releasing your primary and secondary fire. For the best results and the quickest kills, after throwing your Ankh, throw one primary fire, and then quickly shoot a secondary, and then go back to your primary attacks. This will cancel all the animations for the primary fire, and it leads to the most amount of damage in a short time. This also will be able to get you the most damage before the Ankh can get destroyed. An important tip is to always make sure your primary fire is fully reloaded before throwing your Ankh and getting into a fight. Sometimes while attacking the enemy, it is easy to forget that you don't have full shots left, and it can lead to a wasted Ankh if you have to wait for the reload to go off. You should also always pair your secondary Moonblade attack with your Ankh, as this can lead to guaranteed high damage and you won't have to worry about missing your shots. Here are some of my favorite tips for each ability. First, for his left click. This tip seems kind of unknown to many people, but to deal the most damage to enemies, it is more optimal to attack nearby enemies that are within an Ankh range, instead of targeting the Ankh itself. So first throw the Ankh at a group, and then focus on a big target if you can, and this will maximize your damage output rather than aiming at the Ankh. There's a fall off for the damage of the darts after a certain distance, which gets lower as you get further from enemies. This is useful to know, and it is better to be close to the enemies if you can. The starting fall off distance is 30 meters, so if you're within that range you won't have to worry. But if you get further away than that, the fall off at 30 meters decreases to 50% at 50 meters at minus 20% per bounce. The max distance of bounce is 7 meters, which is also the same for his secondary attack and also the radius of the Ankh. For his right click, if you are able to, try to go for headshots as it does a ton more damage. For most characters, you have to aim a little above their heads so it actually hits a headshot, which can be risky as you could potentially overshoot and waste your ability. So really it's up to you if you want to go for the riskier headshot with the higher reward, or just play it safe and stick with a body shot to make sure you can get some damage out of it. His secondary also has the same fall off distance and bounce distance as his primary fire. Now for his E ability for the Ankh, the radius of the overall Ankh is 7 meters, but the radius of the pull-in range is only 5 meters. So if you want to pull in and damage enemies, you want the Ankh to be pretty close to them. One more important thing to know is that the Ankh deals 20 damage to enemies when thrown near them. Next, for the F ability for his grapple, his grappling hook has a max distance of 25 meters and can be used to escape danger or get to high ground quickly. If you shoot the hook at the ground, you go much higher than you normally would, even exceeding the height of a normal double jump, which can be useful to know for getting to high areas of a map. Throwing it at your feet is the most optimal for height and distance, however only try to do this when there aren't any enemies around, because this could easily give them a chance to shoot you out of the air. This also has one of the highest cooldowns of his abilities, so make sure to use this one wisely. Now for his double jump, it has a very low cooldown time of 6 seconds and can be used very frequently while in battle. This jump can give access to high ground and give a good escape, especially when paired with the grapple or the glider, and can temporarily give Moon Knight a view of the enemy over walls, leading to potential for a couple shots. Now for his glider ability, the glider is very useful when paired with the double jump and the grapple, and it can be used whenever Moon Knight is in the air, as it has no cooldown. The glider gives Moon Knight a movement speed of 8.7 meters per second, which is just slightly faster than his normal 6 meters per second base speed. For his melee, it doesn't do a ton of damage, but it's good if you're on cooldowns and if an enemy gets up in your face. And after the third swing of his batons, Moon Knight launches the enemy in the air, which can occasionally be used to throw off the enemy and gain back control of a fight. For his ult, Moon Knight's ult seems to change with every update, and as of Season 2, the portal that opens above the enemies has an 8-meter radius that lasts 4.5 seconds. There are 18 talons that fall during this time, each of which doing a different amount of damage based on how close the enemy is to the center of the circle. The maximum damage is 150, and it goes down as the enemy gets further away from the center. When used in a group of enemies or in a choke point, this ult can deal tons of damage and land a bunch of free kills. Lastly, for his C team up ability, this ability has a super long cooldown of 30 seconds, but it can be very beneficial for his playstyle. You can use this ability to hide from enemies and get some health if you are low, and it can also be used as a good escape from battle. It's one of Moon Knight's only self-heal abilities other than his secondary, and is one of his best. If you are able to get a cloak and dagger on your team to activate this team up, it's very worth it. If you have any more tips, leave them down in the comments, and also if you want to see more of this style of video. Which character do you want to see next? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.